So I am looking at a spec sheet for a little black box here. It costs roughly $450.
Yep.
And it basically just takes one HDMI cable and splits it into four.
Right. That is the Kramer VM-4H2. It's an absolute beast of a machine.
Yeah, but here is my hang up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can go on Amazon and buy a 1 to 4 HDMI splitter for like 20 bucks.
Yeah.
Why does this thing even exist? Why is there a 20 times price difference for something that effectively just, duplicates a picture?
Well, if you are just watching Netflix in your living room, buy the $20 dongle.
Right.
But if you are running a sports bar or a boardroom, that cheap dongle is basically a ticking time bomb. The price difference really comes down to bandwidth and signal integrity.
Okay, so I see 17.82 gigabits per second highlighted here. I mean, usually I just ignore the numbers and plug the cable in. Why should you or I care about that specific number?
Because that is the magic number for uncompressed 4K HDR at 60 frames per second. Most consumer splitters, they cap out around 10.2 gigabits. And to fit a 4K signal through that smaller pipe, they have to compress the color data. It's something called chroma subsampling.
Which is fine for a movie, I guess, but if you're projecting an Excel spreadsheet with tiny red font,
it looks like a blurry, unreadable mess. The Kramer maintains a 4.4.4 color space, which means zero compression. It keeps the text pixel perfect.
got it. Okay, so it handles the bandwidth. But Kramer also lists this equalization and reclocking feature. And isn't a digital signal just ones and zeros? It either works or it doesn't work. Why does it need rebuilding?
Yeah, that's a super common misconception, actually. Over distance or through cheap cables, the timing of those ones and zeros gets sloppy. We call it jitter and skew. A cheap splitter acts like a photocopier making a copy of a copy.
Right, it just passes on the noise.
Exactly. It passes on the noise and the errors.
And eventually the copy's so bad the screen just goes black.
Precisely. So this device is a regeneration station. It reads the messy signal, strips out the noise, retimes the data, and prints a fresh, crisp original to send down the line. It's not just boosting the volume, it's practically retyping the message so it's legible again.
Okay, so the signal is pristine when it leaves the box. But that doesn't really help if the projector refuses to talk to the laptop.
Yeah.
You plug in and the screens just flicker endlessly because they can't agree on the resolution.
Ah, the dreaded handshake loop. That is the ED at work. The screen tries to tell the laptop what it can do, but when you have 4 different screens connected, it turns into a shouting match. The source gets confused and gives up.
So how does the Kramer fix a shouting match?
It acts as a diplomat. It uses a feature called IED Pro to lock the handshake. It tells the laptop to just ignore those screens and talk to it instead. It poses as a perfect 4K display.
That forces a plug-and-play connection.
Right, so the laptop doesn't have to guess, and you avoid that awkward flickering in front of your boss.
What about when the handshake works, but the colors are wrong? I have hooked up Macs to projectors before, and everything looks pink or green.
That is a color space mismatch.
Sure.
Usually the display wants RGB, and the source is sending YCBCR. This box has a Force RGB feature. It actively converts the signal to the universal language of projectors before it even leaves the enclosure.
There is one more huge hurdle, though, and that is HDCP. If this is a Pro device, how does it handle copy protection? Because if I turn off HDCP to make things compatible, won't Netflix or a Blu-ray player just go black?
It would, and it absolutely should. You cannot bypass protection on copyrighted content. That's illegal. But here is the catch. Apple products and some Windows laptops often turn on encryption even when you were just showing a spreadsheet or a slide deck.
Which blocks the signal on older conference room gear for absolutely no reason.
Exactly. The VM-4H2 allows you to selectively authorize HDCP. You can effectively tell your laptop that you do not support encryption.
Which forces the laptop to send an unencrypted signal for your non-copyrighted content.
Yes, it stops the black screen of death for your PowerPoint without breaking the law for Hollywood movies.
So for $452, you aren't really buying a splitter. You're buying insurance against looking like an amateur when the presentation starts.
That is the best way to frame it. It is a fanless industrial tool in a compact Mega Tools enclosure that fits in a rack and just ensures the show goes on.
It really makes you rethink the AV budget.
It should if you spend 50 grand on high-end screens and run it all through a $20 plastic dongle.
You are putting a lawnmower engine in a Ferrari.
Exactly. The plumbing matters just as much as the porcelain.
That brings up a wild thought for you to chew on. As we push towards 8K displays and massive data loads, are we reaching a point where the invisible cables and distribution boxes actually require more advanced tech than the glowing screens we stare at? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Catch you next time.